The system didn't flag the aircraft because it was dangerous. Its transponder was active. Its route was filed. Its call sign matched a registered operator. Its climb profile aligned with the corridor it had been assigned. Time to pass cleanly between two denser traffic bands already moving through the sector. On the main display, it appeared as one return among many. Civilian traffic flowing in parallel streams, separated by altitude, spacing, and timing rules, refined to remove ambiguity before it could matter. At first, nothing stood out. The track initialized normally. Identification fields populated without delay. Historical matching returned high confidence. Predictive vectors aligned with the filed plan far enough ahead that the system prepared to resolve and release the contact early. That was the expected outcome. Then the correlation layer hesitated. Not visibly, not audibly, only as a delay in closure. Position updates arrived on schedule, but the confidence envelope around them narrowed more slowly than expected. The system compensated automatically, adjusting smoothing parameters, extending prediction windows by fractions of a second, recalculating association confidence against nearby returns. This was routine. Thousands of tracks required the same adjustments every day. The system initiated its first automated resolution loop. Weighting parameters were rebalanced to prioritize temporal continuity. Association windows expanded slightly to absorb expected variance. Adjacent tracks were compared to rule out overlap, reflection, or transient interference. For a moment, the confidence score stabilized, not improved, just held. The system prepared to close again. Then the next update arrived and required correction earlier than the last. The predicted path still fit. The deviation was still acceptable. But the effort required to reconcile it increased. Secondary confirmation arrived, valid, but fractionally misaligned in geometry. A parallel sensor feed agreed on presence, but not on exact position. Metadata confirmed compliance, but did not reduce the prediction error. The system completed the first loop. Outcome: unresolved. The aircraft remained coherent. The data remained valid, but the track resisted simplification. The system initiated a second resolution loop. This time, it changed assumptions. Historical weighting was reduced. Live flow conditions were elevated. The track was evaluated not in isolation, but against corridor symmetry, how surrounding traffic was behaving relative to it. Timing buffers were recalculated. Phase gates were rechecked. Expected compression downstream was introduced into the model. Again, the confidence score steadied. Again, it did not recover. The system flagged the condition internally, not as a fault, not as a threat, but as a classification anomaly. All rules satisfied, all data valid, predictability still incomplete. At this point, the system could have released the track. It had justification. It had precedent. Instead, it delayed. Human oversight entered, not through alarm, but through inheritance. An operator assumed responsibility for the track because automation could no longer explain, with sufficient confidence, why it should stop caring. The operator reviewed the data. Everything looked normal. The aircraft was where it should be, moving how it should move, responding exactly as expected. That normality was no longer resolving uncertainty. The track had passed through 2 automated correction cycles and emerged intact, but unchanged in the one way that mattered. It still required attention. The aircraft remained civilian. It remained compliant. It remained ordinary by every visible measure. But inside the system, a quiet conclusion had formed. Nothing was violating the rules, and the rules were no longer enough to guarantee certainty. The system widened its frame. What had been evaluated as a single track was now placed back into the flow. Adjacent corridors, intersecting altitude layers, upstream spacing, downstream compression. Variables normally discarded for efficiency were allowed to persist. The aircraft continued doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Holding speed, holding altitude, holding route. The system began its first escalation loop. Correlation confidence was recalculated using expanded context. Historical traffic density was weighted higher, on the assumption that familiarity should reduce uncertainty. The track was compared against months of similar movements through the same corridor under similar load at similar times. The result was reassuring. Nothing unusual emerged. Statistical alignment improved. The confidence curve stabilized again. For a moment, the system prepared to resolve. Then live-flow comparison reasserted itself. Real-time symmetry across the corridor did not match historical averages. Small timing offsets, irrelevant on their own, stacked just enough to disrupt prediction. The aircraft's position remained legal, but its interaction with surrounding traffic introduced variability. The historical model could not absorb. The first escalation loop completed. Outcome: partially resolved. The system initiated a second escalation loop. This time, it deprioritized history and elevated immediacy. Live sensor fusion tightened. Radar returns were correlated more aggressively with transponder data. Environmental variables were layered in. Localized winds, upstream vectoring, congestion-induced adjustments propagating through the airspace. Phase timing was recalculated again. Expected handoff points were rechecked. Downstream congestion models were refreshed. The aircraft remained compliant. But the prediction error persisted. Not growing, not shrinking, just refusing to collapse. The system flagged the condition internally as sustained confidence decay. Not an alert, not an anomaly worthy of action. A state. Human oversight deepened, not as intervention, but as presence. The operator did not change the aircraft's status. No instructions were issued. No authority was exercised. Instead, the operator monitored how long the system had been trying and failing to resolve something that should have been simple. Minutes passed. The aircraft continued on its route. The system continued cycling. What escalated was not behavior, but cost. Each additional correlation pass consumed time. Each retained track occupied attention. Each unresolved update reduced the system's margin for ignoring the next one. The escalation was quiet, procedural, and cumulative. Nothing had worsened, but certainty had become expensive, and the system began to treat that expense as operationally relevant. Action did not arrive as movement. No alarms sounded. No messages were transmitted. No intercept logic armed or queued. The aircraft remained unaware. The system initiated its first action loop. Authorization was granted to retain the track beyond its standard resolution window. This was not an exception, just a procedural extension. Automated discard logic was deferred by a single cycle, then another, to allow correlation to complete under expanded context. The system assumed the delay would be brief. Correlation thresholds were adjusted to favor continuity over efficiency. Logging density increased. Association confidence was recalculated with stricter requirements before closure could occur. For a moment, the process worked. Confidence stabilized again. Prediction error flattened. The system prepared to release the track. Then the next update arrived. The aircraft remained compliant. The data remained valid. But the same small correction appeared earlier than expected. The first action loop completed. Outcome: retention justified, resolution still denied. The system initiated a second action loop. This time, responsibility shifted more deliberately. What had been managed as an automated exception was elevated into shared ownership. A second analyst was assigned, not to investigate intent, but to maintain continuity across correlation cycles. The track was no longer optimized for clearance. It was optimized for persistence. Procedural gates moved quietly. The track's internal state changed from retain if needed to retain until explained. Closure now required affirmative confidence, not the absence of error. Attention was reallocated. Other tracks continued to resolve automatically. This one did not. The system began budgeting attention as a finite resource. Each additional cycle devoted to this aircraft reduced capacity elsewhere. Not enough to matter immediately, but enough to register. That was the action. Not movement in the sky, movement inside the system. The aircraft was now treated as strategically consequential, not because it posed danger, but because it forced the system to spend effort maintaining certainty. Nothing external marked the change. But internally, the decision had been made. This track would not be released simply because it behaved. It would be released only when the system could explain it. Cleanly, completely, and without decay. The aircraft exited the monitored volume without incident. Its transponder remained active. Its route remained intact. Its timing remained inside expected margins. From the outside, the event concluded cleanly. Inside the system, it did not conclude at all. The first consequence loop began almost immediately. The procedural extensions that had been approved temporarily were not rolled back. Discard logic was restored cautiously, one parameter at a time. Correlation thresholds were tightened, then paused, then left slightly wider than their original values. The system waited to see if the posture would correct itself. It did not. The next set of civilian tracks entered the same corridor. Most resolved normally. A few showed early signs of the same confidence decay. Not enough to escalate, but enough to delay closure. The system hesitated. Those tracks were held open longer than usual. Not because of similarity, but because the system now recognized the pattern of effort required to resolve them. The first consequence loop completed. Outcome. Posture change persisted. The system entered a second consequence loop. This time, the change spread laterally. Operators adjusted habits without instruction. Tracks that would once have been dismissed early were allowed additional correlation cycles. Analysts watched corridor symmetry more closely. Timing compression was treated as a variable worth tracking, not background noise. Nothing was written down. No directive explained the shift. But the system's behavior had changed. Monitoring windows lengthened by small increments. Attention allocation shifted toward continuity. Resolution required slightly more confidence than before. The system was no longer assuming that compliance guaranteed closure. Not because compliance had failed, but because predictability had. The sky still looked the same. Traffic continued to flow. Civilian aircraft moved as they always had. But inside the system, a quiet memory remained. Ambiguity could arrive without violation. And once noticed, it could not be unseen. The consequence was not alertness, it was persistence. The system now carried uncertainty forward, longer, heavier, and more deliberately than it had before. No policy was rewritten. No bulletin circulated. No doctrine was formally announced. The system entered its first doctrinal loop anyway. Civilian traffic continued to move through the airspace exactly as designed. Lawful, predictable by rule, compliant by definition. For a time, the system treated the earlier posture change as situational. An outcome of local conditions. Something that would fade once workload normalized. It did not. Correlation logic continued to favor persistence over efficiency. Early confidence decay, once dismissed as noise, was now allowed to mature before resolution. Closure required explanation, not just compliance. The system tested its own assumptions. It released tracks sooner again, where possible. It tightened thresholds back toward baseline. It attempted to restore the old balance between attention and volume. Each attempt worked, briefly. Then the same pattern reappeared. Confidence stabilized without resolving. Prediction error flattened without collapsing. Ambiguity persisted without violation. The first doctrinal loop completed. Outcome. Old assumptions no longer held under load. The system entered a second doctrinal loop. This time, it stopped trying to restore the past. Civilian movement was no longer treated as neutral background. It became part of the strategic environment, not because it threatened the system, but because it shaped the conditions under which the system could function. Compliance remained visible, measurable, enforceable. Predictability did not. The system separated the two. Safety continued to operate through rules, clear, auditable, and binary. Security emerged through how ambiguity accumulated, gradually, quietly, and without intent. In dense airspace, relevance no longer mapped cleanly to aircraft type or declared purpose. It mapped to system load, timing compression, sensor confidence, and the effort required to maintain explanation. One unresolved track forced more watching. More watching consumed attention. Attention consumption reshaped posture. Nothing needed to be hostile for this to matter. The system learned that strategic consequence could emerge without adversary action, generated instead by volume, timing, and the limits of certainty. Doctrine did not arrive as instruction. It arrived as behavior the system repeated, because it no longer trusted itself to do otherwise. The aircraft was gone. Its track collapsed cleanly, its data archived without remark. Its passage marked complete by every visible metric the system used. The airspace returned to routine flow. Corridors filled and emptied. Altitude layers separated and recombined. Civilian traffic moved through the sky exactly as it always had. Orderly, compliant, indistinguishable. Nothing on the display suggested change, but the system no longer treated that picture the same way. It held tracks longer. It waited for certainty instead of assuming it. It watched not for violations, but for the moment explanation became costly. One assumption had quietly expired. In a sky this crowded, predictability was no longer guaranteed by rules alone. It had become a finite resource, and even civilian movement could quietly consume it.